Hi, my name is Ariel. I study English, and this is my story. Want to share with you about my life in London and my amazing teacher. You can read my story and learn English together with me. Lesson 1. It's a warm and sunny summer day, and I'm on a train. Across from me, there are two women sitting and chatting. I don't know them, but from the way they talk, I can tell they are not from my country. I can't understand much of their conversation, but I know they're speaking English. I also want to speak English, but I'm just starting to learn and don't know many words. Still, I think this is a good chance to practice. Decide to try talking to them. Using simple English, I say a few sentences. They understand me. Even though my vocabulary is small and I speak slowly, the women are very kind and patient. Have a short and easy conversation. I tell them I am learning English, and they are happy to hear that. They tell me they are from England and are coming back from a work conference. Chat for about 10 minutes, and then I have to leave the train. Before I get off, I thank them for talking with me. They give me their contact information and say I can visit them in England if I ever wanted. We say goodbye, and I leave feeling inspired. This moment marks the start of my English learning journey. After this, I decide to work hard on improving my skills, begin translating texts and watching movies in English almost every day. I practice for about 2 hours. After 5 months, I can speak much better. It feels wonderful, but I want to learn even more. I decide to go to London to continue studying English. Once there, I choose a school that looks promising. I can't wait for my first lesson. The first class is on Monday. On that day, I meet my teacher and the other students in the group. My teacher is a young woman, and she is very friendly. She asks everyone to introduce themselves and share where they are from. After that, the lesson begins. Our teacher asks how we have studied English before and what we think is the best way to learn. I tell her I enjoy translating songs and texts, but I'm not sure what method is the most effective. She tells us she will show us a method that works well. She explains that we won't study in the traditional way or use textbooks. Instead, we will focus on using the language as much as possible. This makes me happy because I've never liked studying with textbooks. Next, we discuss what's important when learning a new language. Our teacher says languages are tools for communication. They help us share ideas and understand others. Because of this, she says the best way to learn is by using the language to exchange ideas. This is what we will do in our course. Most of the time, we will focus on speaking. Our teacher tells us that, just like we spoke a lot when we were children learning our first language, we should also speak a lot to learn English as adults. Sadly, many students spend too much time memorizing vocabulary or studying grammar rules without actually speaking English. They concentrate on studying the language rather than using it. Of course, learning new words and grammar is important, but you don't need to focus on studying them directly. In this course, our teacher will teach us an easy and natural way to learn both words and grammar. I like what our teacher says. The lesson continues, and we talk about our hobbies and how we spend our free time. We practice in pairs and also speak with our teacher. It is an amazing experience, and I speak more English during this one lesson than I ever have before. I enjoy it a lot. I've never studied this way before, and it makes me happy. I'm really excited about the next lesson. Lesson 2. How to learn words. On Tuesday, I go back to school. One of the students asks a question that I find interesting. What is the best way to learn new words? Our teacher says there are many ways to learn new words, but the most effective one is reading. She explains that people who read while learning a language improve twice as fast as those who don't. She suggests reading for at least 30 minutes every day. She gives us advice to make reading more helpful. 1. Choose something you like. It's important to read something you enjoy. It could be a fun story, useful information for work, or something about your hobbies. Choose anything that feels boring to you. 2. Pick texts at your level. Find something where you understand most of the words. If it's too hard, it can be discouraging. Enjoyment is key when using English. 3. Check unknown words. If you see a word you don't know, use a dictionary to look it up. You don't need to write the word down or make lists. Just try to understand the text. 4. Learn naturally. When you read, you'll notice how words fit together in sentences. This will help you learn how to use them correctly. This method of learning words is very effective. Try it, and you'll see how quickly you can improve your vocabulary. After this, we move on with the lesson. Discuss life in England and the best jobs for students. This is helpful for me because I want to find a job to do after class. Ask my classmates if they know where I can look for work, and they tell me to visit a job center. The job center has many jobs for students. This is great for me, and I feel happy knowing where I can look for work after my school day ends. I visit the job center. I'm not sure what kind of job I can do, so I ask a lady at the center about the best job for a student. She tells me there are some good options for students, such as working as a cleaner or as a waiter in a cafe. Explain to her that I don't have experience in these jobs. She reassures me that my English is good enough for the cafe job. She also says the training is easy and that working in a cafe will give me more opportunities to speak English compared to being a cleaner. She says I can start working on Thursday. I feel happy because I found a job where I can practice speaking English. If you want to learn new words effectively, remember to read for 30 minutes each day. Lesson 3. How to learn pronunciation. On Wednesday, I go back to school. One student in the class is quieter than the others, is from South Korea. When our teacher asks if we have any questions, this student raises his hand and says he has a question. He explains that pronunciation is very hard for him. He knows his pronunciation is not good, and he doesn't know how to make it better. Because of this, he doesn't like speaking much, as he feels embarrassed when people hear his pronunciation. He mentions that he reads books and watches movies in English often. While he can understand English well, he wants to improve his speaking skills. He asks the teacher for advice on how to improve his pronunciation. Our teacher listens and then says, "All right, I'll explain something about pronunciation and how to practice it. I'll also share a great method to help you all improve." First, she talks about why students face difficulties with pronunciation. When we speak, we use the muscles in our mouths. Every language uses these muscles differently. The problem comes when students learning English move their mouths the same way they do in their native language. This makes their pronunciation sound different from native speakers. She explains that this happens to almost everyone learning English and that it's not a big issue. People usually understand what you mean, even if your pronunciation isn't perfect. However, you can still improve it if you practice. She then introduces a technique called shadowing. Shadowing is very simple. You listen to a word or phrase and immediately repeat it, copying the sound exactly. Our teacher explains that children learn their first language by copying their parents again and again until their pronunciation becomes correct. Shadowing works the same way. It helps you improve by practicing this copying technique. You can improve your English pronunciation in the same way. Here's how. Find a video or audio recording that is easy to understand and not too fast. Listen carefully and repeat what you hear right after hearing it. It's all you need to do. Our teacher then visits www.youtube.com and searches for videos about the shadowing technique. She finds one that demonstrates it very well. Watch the video together and then practice shadowing for about 3 minutes. Afterward, our teacher explains that shadowing can also help when preparing for an English presentation. You want your pronunciation to sound more like a native speaker. Go somewhere private before the presentation and practice shadowing for about 10 minutes. This can really help improve your pronunciation when speaking in front of others. Find this very interesting because I've never heard of this technique before. When the lesson ends, I go to the school reception and ask if the school offers any sports activities. I want to play some sports while I'm in England. The receptionist tells me, yes, we have a table tennis team and a football team. The football team has training today at 8 a.m. I feel very happy because sports are a big part of my life. I go to the football training and meet many players from different countries. There are players from Brazil, Japan, Vietnam, Spain, Argentina, and Italy. I enjoy the training a lot, and I'm happy that my time in England is starting so well. I have a great teacher, new friends from my football team, and tomorrow I start my new job. If you want to improve your pronunciation, practice repeating after native speakers. Lesson 4: How to practice speaking. On Thursday, I go back to school. We have a new student in the class. Her name is Na, and she is from Italy. At the beginning of the lesson, our teacher asks Na how her life is. The teacher already knows her because Na attended a beginner class last summer for 2 weeks. When Na speaks, her English is amazing, her pronunciation is excellent, and she is very fluent. The teacher is delighted and says, Na, where did you learn to speak English so well? You speak so fluently. What school did you attend? Na smiles and says, I didn't go to any school. I learned English at home by following the advice and techniques you taught us last summer. I read a lot, practiced shadowing, and talked to myself in English. I also tried to think more in English instead of Italian. That's how I improved. The 2 weeks I spent in your class last summer helped me so much. You showed me what to do, and I worked on my English every day. Why I wanted to join your class again. A year ago, I was a beginner, and now I can speak English. I want to keep learning from you. My teacher looks very pleased when she hears Na's words. She thanks Na for sharing her experience. It is all very fascinating to me. I already understand the importance of reading and know about the shadowing technique. However, Na mentioned something new, thinking aloud. Don't know what it is, so I ask, what is thinking aloud? Our teacher replies, thinking aloud is a very simple but powerful technique. However, you need strong motivation to learn English if you want it to work. Some people find it a little strange at first, but if you use it, your English can improve very quickly. I respond, I'm very motivated. I don't mind if the technique seems strange. If it helps, I want to try it. Can you teach us how to do it? The teacher smiles and says, "Of course, it's very simple. Normally, you think in your native language all day long. It's natural. But with this technique, you start thinking in English instead. Once you begin thinking in English, you can also say your thoughts aloud. That's all it is, speaking out loud what you're thinking." Is that all? I ask. It seems very easy, but you said it's a powerful technique. Why does it work so well? The teacher answers, "Good question. Maybe you can ask Na. She has been using this technique for a year. She can share what she has learned." The teacher turns to Na and asks if she can explain her experience with thinking aloud. Na agrees and says, "When I first started using this technique, it was hard. I began with very simple sentences, like, I can speak English. It is good that I can speak English. I want to get better. I need to practice every day. I don't know many words, but I can use the words I do know. I can express my ideas with these words. I can do this. This is great." The sentences were very basic. I noticed that the thoughts I had in Italian were long and complex, but I couldn't express them the same way in English. I had to simplify my ideas. Thinking in simple English was the hardest part. But after some time, it felt natural. Thinking in English became normal for me. Then, something amazing happened. I met a man from Spain while he was on holiday in France. Was still a beginner, but we started talking in English. I realized I could speak with him without many problems. My sentences were short and simple, but because I had practiced saying them aloud so many times, I could use them easily. I didn't have to translate from Italian to English in my head anymore. That was the best part of using this technique. After meeting the man from Spain, I started using the thinking aloud technique even more often. It helped me a lot. My ability to express ideas improved so much. Still use this technique every day, and it really is very effective. After school, I head to the cafe for my job training. I don't know what to expect since I've never worked in a cafe before. I'm unsure if I'll be able to handle this job. When I arrive, I am surprised. The cafe is modern and sells coffee, tea, chocolate, cakes, and sandwiches. My boss is only 20 years old, but she has been working there for over 3 years. She has a lot of experience and knows everything very well. She teaches me how to prepare coffee, wash dishes, and interact with customers. Everything is new to me. Only remember about 20% of what she explains, but she lets me practice and corrects my mistakes. She is very kind, and I learn quickly. After my first day, I feel very tired. I had to learn a lot of new things, but I'm happy to have this job. The next day, Friday, I go back to school. During the lesson, one student asks a good question. When I speak, I'm not always sure if I'm using correct grammar. Can you help me? What should I do if I want to improve my grammar? Our teacher smiles and replies, "That's a great question. There are 2 types of students. Some want to speak English fluently, and others need to pass an exam. The approach is different for each group." She continues, "First, let's talk about students who need English for speaking. This is your goal. You don't need to focus too much on grammar. Think about how you learned your first language. You didn't study grammar, but you still learned how to speak. You can do the same with English by using the language naturally. The best way to learn grammar naturally is by reading a lot. Books are written with proper grammar, so when you read, you'll see how grammar works in full sentences. Another useful method is shadowing. When you shadow, you practice correct grammar without having to memorize anything. You just copy sentences with the correct structure. If you want to speak English but also want to study grammar, I recommend visiting www.mars.com. This website explains which grammar rules are important for different levels of English. You can find the most useful grammar rules for speaking there. She then explains the second group. Now, for students who need to pass an exam, the strategy is different. Suggest focusing specifically on that exam. Possible, get past versions of the test and practice with them. The exam questions might be different, but the structure is usually similar. Practicing with past tests will help you feel prepared. I also recommend taking the real exam only when you consistently get passing scores on practice tests. This will give you confidence that you're ready. Did I answer your question? Yes, thank you, says the student. This is good news. I don't like studying grammar. I learn English because I want to be able to speak. I don't need to pass any exam. I'm happy that I don't have to study grammar much. I like reading, and I am happy that I can learn grammar by reading books. After the lesson, I decide to check out www.mars.com after the lesson. The very useful website with clear grammar rules and examples for every level of English. They have 3 levels: 500 words, 1,000 words, and 2,500 words. In the afternoon, I go to work. It's my second day, and I'm already able to handle many tasks on my own. Though my boss is always ready to help if needed, I'm realizing that the job isn't very difficult, and I also get to practice English by speaking with customers. When you want to improve your grammar, read a lot. Lesson 6. How to test your English. It's Monday again, and I'm back at school.at. The beginning of the lesson, our teacher asks what we did over the weekend. Share that I worked on Saturday and that I'm already getting the hang of my job. I also mention how much I enjoy speaking with customers. When I finish speaking, one of the girls in the class looks surprised and says, "What happened to your voice? You sound very different from last week. Your pronunciation is so much better." I smile and reply, "Thank you. I'm glad you noticed." Shadowing practice. On Saturday evening after work and throughout Sunday, I practiced shadowing intensively, focused on mimicking native speakers as closely as possible. I know my pronunciation isn't perfect yet, but I've noticed significant improvement. Our teacher asks if anyone else practiced shadowing. 3 students raise their hands, including the student from South Korea, who has also been enjoying this technique. One student shares her experience. I tried shadowing, but my mouth started hurting a lot after just 5 minutes, so I had to stop. Also, I found it hard to repeat everything because some recordings were too fast. Our teacher responds encouragingly, "Thank you for trying the technique. If your mouth hurts after 5 minutes, it means you're doing it right. Your muscles are being trained to move differently, just as they would in the gym when you exercise." Take a short break and then continue practicing for another 5 minutes. Over time, it will become easier. Shadowing is more than just improving pronunciation. It also helps with intonation. rhythm, and how words are connected in natural sentences. The recording feels too fast, don't worry. You can start by repeating only the first or last word of each sentence. With practice, you'll be able to follow the entire recording. I agree that this is true. On Saturday, when I started with shadowing, it was quite difficult for me, yet by Sunday evening, it was much easier to repeat what I heard. Then, I raise a question for our teacher. I looked at www.grammarandls.com, and it seems like a great resource. However, I'm not sure which level is right for me because I don't know how many words I know in English. Our teacher turns to the class. Does anyone here know how many words they know in English? It turns out that nobody has an answer. No, we are intermediate students, but none of us know exactly how many words we've learned. The teacher's advice: there's actually a simple way to find out, our teacher says. There's a website for people studying foreign languages that can help you test how many words you know. The test is quick and has only 2 steps. The name of the website is wb-test-languages.com. You can use it to check your vocabulary size every month. That way, you can track your progress. If you're curious, take out your smartphones and give it a try now. Discovering vocabulary levels. Excited to know my vocabulary size. I take the test immediately. It turns out I know 2,300 words in English. Most of my classmates fall between 1,500 and 2,500 words, with only Nina and the boy from Australia reaching 2,500 words. Our teacher smiles as she looks at the results. Based on these scores, many of you are ready to start using grammar from level 3. For students who know between 2,200 and 3,200 words, remember to test your progress monthly to keep improving. Lesson 7: How to handle mistakes. On Tuesday, we have another interesting lesson. Point 1: Student asks a question. I'd like to practice speaking with people around me, but I'm afraid of making mistakes. I don't want to look stupid. Can you help me? Our teacher nods thoughtfully. Making mistakes is an important topic, and many people feel this way. Let me share my approach with you. I've been learning languages for years, and I'm currently studying Scottish. When I speak Scottish, I don't worry about making mistakes. The reason is simple. When I learned my native language, I didn't care about making mistakes either. Think about a child learning to speak. They make mistakes all the time, but keep going. Why should it be different for us? My main goal when I speak any language is to express my ideas, that mistakes are part of the process. I know that by reading, speaking, and practicing shadowing, my Scottish will naturally improve over time. Right now, I know 2,500 words in Scottish, which is about the level of a 3-year-old child. A 3-year-old makes many mistakes, but they don't let it stop them. By the time they're 4, they make fewer mistakes. By 5, they speak fluently with hardly any errors. Language learning is like that for adults, too. If you focus on communication instead of perfection, you'll find that mistakes become smaller and less frequent over time. You need to think the same way. Right now, most of you know around 2,200 words, so it's completely fine to make mistakes sometimes. As you keep using English, you will make fewer mistakes over time. You can't improve without making errors. when you practice English, it's okay if everything isn't perfect. Perfection comes with time and practice. Everyone who started learning English began at the same place, level 0. Learning a new language is similar to learning how to play a musical instrument. It requires training. At the start of your training, nothing will be perfect, and you will make errors. This is completely normal. Think of it as a necessary part of learning. You skip this phase of making mistakes, you cannot move to higher levels. By continuing to practice what you want to learn, your mistakes will slowly disappear. To make fewer mistakes, read a lot and try shadowing. Reading aloud can also help you reduce mistakes when you speak to others. Focus only on sharing your ideas. Don't worry about making errors. When you talk, you are practicing how to turn your thoughts into words. This isn't the time to learn new grammar or vocabulary. You have other ways to do that. Don't feel bad about mistakes. Everyone learning a new language makes them, even famous people, CEOs, or politicians. When you hear these people speaking on TV, you notice they don't pay attention to small mistakes. Instead, they focus on expressing their ideas. You should do the same thing. Does that make sense? The girl answers, "Yes, thank you." Lesson 8. Tips for remembering words. On Wednesday, I returned to school. At the start of the lesson, a student says, "I've been reading more lately. It feels helpful for me. I can see that my grammar is getting better, but I have one problem. When I read, I often look up new words in the dictionary, then I keep reading. But sometimes, when I see the same word just 10 minutes later, I forget it and have to look it up again. Can you help me remember words better?" Our teacher smiles and says this is a great question. Then she explains. It's completely normal to forget new words at first. Usually, you'll need to look up a word 5 times before you remember it. Some words, like verbs, might need even more, up to 12 or 15 times. When we learn a new word, it goes through stages. You will only fully remember the word once you've reached the last stage. There are 5 stages. Let's look at them together. The first stage is when you see or hear a word for the very first time. You don't know it yet, so you check the dictionary. The second stage is when you come across the same word again later. You recognize that you've seen it before, but you still don't remember its meaning, so you look it up again. The third stage happens when you see the word again, and you have an idea of what it might mean, but you aren't completely sure. For example, you might know it is the name of an object, an animal, or a type of action. The fourth stage is when you recognize the word and understand its meaning when you see it, but you still can't remember it when you try to say it. At this point, the word is part of your passive vocabulary. The fifth stage is when you can confidently use the word while speaking. So, there are 5 stages in total. You see now why it's impossible to remember a word the first time you see it. You would have to skip all the stages in one step. Instead, you need to see or hear the word multiple times and let it move through all the stages before reaching stage 5. You should feel proud not only when you fully learn a new word but also when you move from one stage to the next. Each step brings you closer to your final goal, using the word comfortably in everyday conversations. I find all of this very interesting. I didn't know about these stages before, but it makes a lot of sense. Experienced looking up a word in the dictionary, only to forget it a few minutes later and need to check it again. I used to feel silly when that happened, but now I understand that it's completely normal. I know it takes several encounters with a word before I can use it properly. After school, I head to football practice. Our coach announces that there will be a match on Saturday. I'll be playing against a team from another school in Cambridge. Asks me to join the school team for the match. Feel really happy and can't wait for Saturday's game. To fully remember a new word, you need to see or hear it around 12 times. Lesson 9: Ways to improve listening. The following day, I go back to school. During the lesson, one student asks an important question. He wants advice on how to improve his listening skills. He also wants to know the most effective ways to practice. Our teacher responds, "Thank you for asking. Good listening skills are essential for communication. If you don't understand what people are saying, it will be very hard to talk with them." There are plenty of resources online for learning English. However, some students find it challenging to choose listening materials that suit them. Let's discuss what you should listen to. There are two kinds of listening materials. You can either listen to audio recordings or watch films. These two types are different, and you need to follow different methods for each. When you listen to audio, you should already know at least 93% of the words. There are many new words. Try to read the text first, if it's available, and learn the words you don't know. The purpose of listening practice is to understand spoken language, not to focus on learning new words. Of course, you might learn some new words while listening, but that's not the main goal. When practicing listening, focus on understanding the message in the spoken English. It's important to use materials that match your current level of English. For example, simplified books with audio recordings are a great option. I highly recommend these books because you can choose the right level for your skills. If you have a book like this, start by reading the text first, then listen to the audio at home or while traveling. You can find great books at www.robinsoncrusoe.com. If you prefer news, visit www.news.com. These sites offer materials in 3 levels of English, so you can pick the one that works for you. The second type of listening practice involves films and videos on www.youtube.com are excellent resources, but you should start using them only after you know at least 2,500 words in English. When watching a film, follow this process. First, watch it with subtitles to understand the story. After that, watch it again without subtitles. If you enjoy the movie, feel free to watch it multiple times. Each time you watch, you'll understand more. You can also watch online videos about topics that interest you. For example, if you like nature, you might enjoy documentaries about wildlife. Reality shows are another good option. They are often easier to follow than films or documentaries because their structure is simpler and more predictable. It's important to spend at least 35 minutes a day listening to English. The more time you spend listening, the faster you will improve your understanding. While listening, focus on what you already understand, even if it's only 12% in the beginning. Avoid getting discouraged by the parts you don't understand yet. Instead, celebrate every new word or sentence that makes sense to you. Listening is one of the easiest ways to learn. You don't have to do anything except listen. Did this advice help you? Yes, the student replies. Thank you. Listening is a topic I really care about. Now I know how to practice better. To improve your listening skills, listen for at least 35 minutes every day. Lesson 12. What you need before you start. On Friday, we have a very interesting discussion in class. Our teacher asks us a question. What was your main reason to start learning English? Do you remember the moment you first began? When did you start feeling interested in the language? I answer that I remember the moment when I became interested in English. The teacher replies, "Can you share what happened?" I say, "Of course, first, I should say that English wasn't always my favorite subject. I started learning it in high school. In the beginning, it was very hard for me. I couldn't understand the structure of the language. It didn't make sense to me. I tried to memorize words and study grammar, but it was really difficult. When I finished high school, I was still at a beginner level. I couldn't speak English and thought I would never learn it properly. I believed English wasn't for me, but then, something changed. I have always loved music, and when I was 22, I started listening to the Beatles. I wanted to understand the lyrics, so I began translating their songs. Slowly, I understood more and more. Later, I met two women from England on a train. We had a simple conversation, but it made a big difference for me. It gave me confidence that I could learn English. After that, I worked on my English almost every day and improved step by step. Finally, I decided to go to England to continue learning and get better. My teacher thanks me for sharing my story and says, "There is something interesting in your story. You are still the same person. But the first you didn't have any motivation to learn English. The second you found motivation, you wanted to understand songs." This shows how important motivation is. When you have it, you can succeed. Without it, success is much harder. Then, the teacher asks everyone in the class about their motivation to learn English. The stories are very interesting. One girl says she wants to read historical books in their original English. Another student dreams of becoming a professional tennis coach in England. He wants to speak perfect English before starting his career. One woman wants to work at a big international company and needs English for her job. I noticed that everyone has their own motivation, whether for real-life situations or learning from books. At the end of the lesson, our teacher asks if we like English. I answer, "I didn't like English in high school, but now I enjoy it a lot. I see how useful it is to know this language." The teacher says, "This is another important point about learning a language. It helps if you like something connected to English, such as the people, music, culture, or history. If you enjoy English, it becomes easier to learn." To communicate well in English, you need to know about 3,200 words. But if you don't like the language, it's harder to practice enough to reach that level. I agree with my teacher. Now I enjoy not only the Beatles, but also my teacher and my boss, who is also from England. Like English humor too. It is much easier for me now to find time to practice English every day. On Saturday, I play football for my school team. Our team has some excellent players, and we win the game 4-3. Everyone is very happy. So after the match, we go to the pub to celebrate our victory. When you want to learn English, it is important to have motivation to practice it every day. Lesson 12. How to learn 3,300 words. In our next lesson, a student asks the teacher a question. You said it's good to know 3,300 words. Where can I find the most important words to learn? The teacher answers, you can search online for a list of the 3,300 most common English words, but such a list won't help you much. If you study these words from the list, you'll learn them without context. You won't see them as part of a story or understand how they connect with other words in sentences. This kind of learning only stores words in your short-term memory. This method works for some basic words, like those used to name things and people around us. For example, mother, father, apple, blue, orange, dog, cat, book, car, house, city, boy, girl, water, cinema, or paper. These words are easy to imagine. When you learn the word dog, you immediately know what it is because you have a clear picture in your mind. But if you want to learn more abstract words like appreciate or suppose, this method doesn't work well. This is a problem for many students. They begin by using word lists, which work at first. They think this is the way to learn English. They don't realize that after learning about 1,200 words, they need to use a different system. To learn more advanced words, you must learn them in sentences. When you understand a word in the context of a sentence, it stays in your memory much better. You can use word lists, but this method usually only works up to 1,000 words. After that, it becomes slow and less effective. There are better ways, like reading beginner-friendly books. For example, I recommend Robinson Crusoe in simplified English. You can find it at www.com. It's the best book I know for learning new words at the beginner level. The teacher also shares an interesting idea. Important words will appear in your life again and again until you learn them. This is how we naturally learn our first language as children. Don't use word lists. We simply hear and use the language. Important words keep showing up until we finally understand them. This is how we continue to learn new words throughout our lives. For instance, the verb Google is a relatively new word in many languages. People didn't learn it from lists. They learned it by using the language. The first time you heard Google, you probably didn't know its meaning, but over time, as the word came up again and again, you eventually understood it. So, you don't need word lists. Instead, read stories and interesting texts. When you use English daily, you will learn new words more effectively. Does that make sense? Yes, says the student. Thank you. After school, I go to my job. I already know how to do everything well. My work is becoming easier and feels automatic. Feel happy because I can understand the customers. It's not very hard since the conversations are often the same. Most customers ask for coffee or sandwiches, so they use similar words. My confidence grows, and sometimes I have longer chats with customers. Everything is going well, but then something happens that surprises me. Lesson 12: How to improve your accent. On Tuesday, while I am at work, something unusual happens. Two customers come into the cafe, a husband and wife. The man starts talking to me, but I don't understand what he is saying. I think he is asking for something we don't sell, so I call my boss. She speaks with the man and gives him 2 coffees and 2 sandwiches from our menu. I am surprised. After they leave, I apologize to my boss for not understanding the man. She tells me it's fine and explains that sometimes we can't understand people because of their accents. She says the couple was from Scotland. The next day, I go to school and tell my teacher about what happened, explain that I felt embarrassed because I didn't understand the customer. It made me wonder if my English was good enough for the job. Even though my boss was kind about it, I still wanted advice from my teacher on how to handle these situations. My teacher says, "I understand how you feel. You are used to hearing English as it's spoken in London, but the Scottish accent is different. Your ears are not familiar with it yet. The good news is that you can train your ears to understand the Scottish accent. What happened is normal. Even if you speak English well, it's common to struggle with accents when you hear them for the first time. If you visit a place where people have a different accent, it can take about 2 weeks to adjust. You don't need to think there's anything wrong with your English, you just need some practice to get used to the new accent." Then I ask, "So how can I practice understanding the Scottish accent if I don't live in Scotland?" My teacher replies, "You can watch movies or TV shows with Scottish actors. You can also try comedies or series from Scotland. The more you listen, the more you will understand." I thank her for the advice. After school, I go back to work around 4 o'clock. 2 new customers come in. This time, they aren't from Scotland. They are tourists who speak very basic English. My boss serves them, and when she realizes they don't speak English well, she does something interesting. She changes the way she talks, using simple sentences with only 3 or 4 words. I notice that the tourists understand her easily. They end up buying 2 coffees, 2 sandwiches, and 2 cakes. The ladies are happy, and my boss is happy too. After they leave, I tell her that it was great how she changed her English to help them understand. She smiles and says that sometimes it's important to speak very simply. She explains, "It doesn't matter how well our customers speak English. What matters is that they feel comfortable here. They know they can speak English in our cafe. They might come back every day." I think my boss is very smart. She always does her best to make customers happy. It's probably why our cafe is so popular and always busy. If you want to understand people with different accents, you should listen to audio recordings in that accent for some time. Lesson 15. What you can do at your level. The next day at school, I tell my teacher about what happened with my boss and the 2 ladies who didn't speak much English. My teacher says, "That's wonderful. Your boss sounds like a very smart person. It's true that communication is possible with anyone. Even people who know just a little English can still have conversations with those who know more." She continues, "Today, let's talk about different levels of English and what you can do at each one. We'll start with the lowest level, 1,200 words. At this level, students can talk about simple, everyday things. Their speaking is very basic, and they use short sentences, usually with 4 words or fewer. Conversations are slow and limited, but it's possible to communicate for a short time if the other person also speaks in simple sentences. When students move up to the next level, with 2,200 words, things become easier, sentences get longer, and conversations feel more natural. Most of you in this class are at this level. You can talk about many topics, like family, hobbies, work, and travel. However, you might still find it hard to have deeper conversations on some topics, but for daily life, this level is usually enough. If you want to discuss more complex topics, knowing 3,300 words is a good goal. At this level, you can have deeper conversations on many subjects. For students who want to speak English well, 3,300 words should be your target. Of course, you can learn more words, and the more you know, the easier it will be to communicate. But 3,300 words are usually enough for talking about almost anything. I think the two ladies in your cafe probably know about 1,200 words. Your boss met them at their level to have a basic conversation with them. After school, I go to work again. The two ladies come back to our cafe, and this time, they bring two friends with them. It's my turn to serve them. I speak to them in short and simple sentences. They understand me, and it makes me very happy. The ladies tell me they are tourists from Japan. They say they like our cafe because people here understand them. Lesson 16, Overcoming Shyness. On Thursday, I go to school as usual. During the lesson, one student asks a very interesting question. I feel really shy when I have to speak English. How can I stop being so shy? Our teacher answers, it's normal to feel shy when you are speaking another language or trying to do something new, and there's a chance of making mistakes. I was very shy too when I started learning other languages. Remember being afraid of mistakes. I made one. I felt embarrassed and sometimes blushed, but now, I think differently, focus on using the language to communicate, and I don't care much about mistakes. Right now, I'm learning Scottish. It's not easy, and sometimes I feel shy when I use it. I might blush if I make a mistake, but I don't let it stop me. These feelings don't last long. I keep using Scottish because I know that's the only way to improve. Remind myself that I'm just a student learning step by step. You can't skip levels overnight. A beginner can't become fluent in 1 hour. When I speak some Scottish, I see that people who speak it value my effort. You should think the same way about English. You can speak some English, you can talk to others in English. That's amazing progress. Look at what you've already achieved. You know 2,200 words now. You started from zero, and here you are with a strong vocabulary. Some students believe that speaking English means being like a native speaker. They want perfect grammar, flawless pronunciation, and no mistakes. When they can't reach that level, they feel disappointed and criticize themselves. It's important to remember that you're all doing very well. You've already learned so much English. Keep practicing, and you'll become less shy with time. I really like what the teacher says. I sometimes feel shy too. I know I need to practice more, but I often hesitate because I don't want to feel silly. Now I decide to be braver and use these chances to improve. One student adds, sometimes I want to say something, but I don't know the right word. I freeze and feel so stupid after that. I don't want to try again because I'm scared of making the same mistake. Our teacher replies, when you start speaking English, you need to prepare and practice. Spend about 35 minutes every day on each activity. Thank you for joining me today on English Storyteller. If you liked this lesson, don't forget to like and subscribe.